On Wednesday, all eyes will be on the Finance Minister, Tito Mboweni, when he delivers his midterm budget. The midterm budget comes at critical time as the country, as growth stalls and poverty and unemployment rise. Now, for what we can expect, I'm now joined by Bonang Mohale, who is the Chancellor of the University of the Free State. Mr. Mohale, thank you so much for your time. Perhaps maybe we can start here. We know that this interview was supposed to be about gender inequality, particularly in corporate South Africa. But perhaps let's focus our attention on the midterm budget and then go into that gender inequality. Those pertinent questions obviously there needs our focus. But on the midterm budget itself, what can we expect? What are your expectations?
So first, thank you very much for having me. Secondly, we are having this midterm budget policy statement at the time that the Minister of Finance had asked for a week's postponement for three reasons. The first one is that the President had actually extended the social and economic relief, especially of the 5.6 million people who are on 350 rands grants. This is over and above the 18 million who are already on social security. Secondly, it's because the minister needed to find more revenue to bail out South African Airways to the tune of 10.5 billion South African rands. Thirdly, if the CEOs have been taking salary cuts, no bonuses, and indeed contributing to the Solidarity Fund, Labour continues to demand double-digit salary increases, perhaps understandably so because of the legacy of apartheid. But 26 years into democracy, I think it's about time that all of us started talking about what's in the best interest of South Africa Inc. So the minister now is going to present this budget policy statement at the time that we are facing a fiscal crisis, when we are borrowed to the hilt, when the cost of borrowing has actually increased, when the budget deficit is growing, when the revenues that we collect from SARS is actually reduced because the taxes that companies pay due to the profits that is highly subdued and suppressed is now reduced. So indeed, we are in a spot of bother, says Ayanda, my dear sister.
In fact, when you say fiscal crisis, I remember the finance minister saying we are in a fiscal cliff, where we are heading towards a fiscal cliff where we continue to incur debt and there's no growth prospect. He's even likened us to Argentina. So my question to you is, are we heading to a crisis, and what can government do?
Absolutely, because if you think about it, what this economy is suffering from, and therefore the ANC-led government, is the lowest levels of confidence, of trust and hope since the Second World War. And what does the government do to respond? They come up with another plan. Our people are not asking for another plan. They already have more than 6 plans. The very first was the Reconstruction and Development Program, RDP, immediately after the 27th of April 1994, after our elections. The second was the Growth, Employment and Redistribution Strategy, a second plan. And then during the time of Deputy President Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, we then came up with ASGISA. 2 more plans was the Growth, Employment and Redistribution Strategies successor, which is called the New Growth Path, which promised 4 things. And then, of course, the one that we are busy implementing is called the NDP 2030. We are still left with another 10 years. Now we develop another plan called the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan. It's not the plans that is our problems. It is the doing, the execution. That's where we are falling short. At a time where the people who call themselves our leaders are stealing the 500 billion emergency socio-economic stimulus package, and they've stolen 2/3 of it in irregular and less than wholesome expenditure of 15 billion. 10.5 billion has gone into the pockets of other people with the most amazing impunity. Lastly, also at the time that as if life esidimeni was not sufficient, we are seeing in the Free State, where even the asbestos consultancy, 255 million, where 21 million was going to be required to actually do the work, 200 million is actually planned to be a profit, but 255 million, all of it gets eaten, as if the Estina dairy farm was not enough, as if the 100 million that was scheduled and indeed planned for people to have houses that have not been built, the foundations has been laid, the roof is still lying bare, is really not enough. So when people are saying my problem is confidence, it's trust and it's hope, we should be having a critical conversation that says, how do we restore that trust? How do we extend hope? And indeed, how do we give our people much more dreams so that they can hold on to something that is much more meaningful, Sisayanda?
In fact, some people would argue with you, Mr. Mohale, and say that the government is doing, but it's not doing the right things. I mean, one of the things that they've been criticized about is their lack of just making tough decisions. Government continues to pump money into state-owned entities, as an example.
So we need to do. And South Africa is lucky that way, because even the NDP 2030 says these are the 9 things that you have to do in order to grow by 2030. Number 1 on that list, because the issue is trust, we need to send the top state capture miscreants to jail. Number 2, we need to stop the bleeding, because the bribery, stealing and cheating, the state capture is still continuing. The theft, the industrial scale looting is still happening, as we saw through PPEs and the 500 billion. Number 3, we have been talking about embarking on very deep, systemic and systematic structural reforms, and yet we have not embarked on this. So what is needed? It's those reforms. The 4th one that needs to be done is to ensure that this economy grows, because if the economy is not growing, very soon we'll be talking about the redistribution of poverty, not the redistribution of wealth. The last 2 is creating jobs in large numbers, not in and of itself, because when you create jobs, you are actually creating the markets of the future. And then, of course, lastly, it's about ensuring that what is going to be our common enemy indeed, because we had the common enemy, which was apartheid, before our democracy. At the moment, the way people are acting with impunity, absolute daylight robbery, we need to define, describe, and shape for ourselves the new hope, the new common good, the new common purpose. I think that's where we are indeed falling short, Sisayanda.
Talking about new hope and new a common purpose, let's switch gears now and turn our focus on the matter of the day. Now, as it relates to corporate South Africa, why is gender inequality in business leadership persistently vague as it relates to women, when women constitute more than 50% of this country's population?
In fact, Sisayanda, it gets worse. Because let's reflect a little bit. Even in the Fortune 500 companies in the US of A, 35% of those boards don't have a single woman as a non-executive director on their boards. 26 years into democracy, what we are seeing is women are 51% of the population of 59.3 million South Africans, and yet their representations in positions of leadership is less than 24%.